You won't believe what has been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years, right in your own room, right above your head, unseen, unnoticed, until now. For the last 24 hours, the veil has been thinning, and the ancient gospel of Mary Magdalene, almost destroyed by those who feared its truth, is whispering a secret the world was never meant to know. You are about to witness what even the church tried to erase, beings that operate in frequencies your eyes were trained to ignore. Archons, the gatekeepers of human perception, entities that attach to your thoughts, shape your fears, and feed on your emotions, have been walking among us, right outside the reach of your ordinary sight. But here's the shock: you've been given the chance to see them. Not in dreams, not in meditation, but with your eyes wide open in the waking world, the very place they thought you would never notice. Imagine seeing a shadow that moves with intent, a shimmer that pulses with consciousness, or a figure that recoils the moment it realizes you are aware. That moment changes everything, because power collapses the second it is exposed. Mary herself ascended through 7 realms, passing through the gates of invisibility, because she learned the one secret no one was allowed to know. Visibility is the only thing that can unmask them. And tonight, for the first time in millennia, you're going to glimpse what has been hiding from you. You can ignore it, or you can choose to see. But remember, once your eyes open, nothing will ever be hidden again. If you dare to uncover the truth and witness the archons in your world, you'll never be able to unsee it, and the choice of turning away is no longer yours. So if you want to truly see what has always been hiding in your world, comment, "I see them," like this video, share it with someone awake, and subscribe, because turning away is no longer an option. Every second you wait, the unseen grows bolder, and they are already watching whether you notice or not. Red circle. You ever stumble upon something that feels like it was buried on purpose? Something that, if you really let it sink in, shakes the foundation of what you think you know about reality. That's exactly what's happening right now. Within the last day, a forgotten gospel from Nag Hammadi has resurfaced, pulling threads that were once thought erased from history. But here's the thing, it's not offering comfort. This isn't some quaint artifact to admire from a dusty shelf. No, this text seems alive, almost whispering that what it describes isn't just history, it's ongoing. It's as if someone picked up the pen and the story kept writing itself while we were all busy believing in its absence. And suddenly, attention is drawn to Mary Magdalene, not the symbolic, sanitized version we're taught to revere, but Mary as a witness, someone describing lived experience rather than abstract belief. It's like hearing a voice from the past, speaking directly into the present. And then comes the question that rattles the mind. How did you see them? It's a question that doesn't invite comfort. It doesn't ask what you believe, it asks what you observed. It implies visibility. It implies evidence. And for a moment, you realize that everything you've assumed about perception, about the way reality appears to you, may be incomplete. There's a central mystery weaving itself through all of this. Imagine for a second that the dominant forces shaping human thought, the invisible currents that guide our impulses, our fears, even our dreams, have been operating in plain sight, but unnoticed. And now, just now, awareness of this force is beginning to surface. It's subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakably present once you begin to notice it. Mary's ascent, as described in the text, has also taken on a new dimension. It's no longer just allegory. It's a sequence of encounters, of thresholds crossed, that mirrors something real and ongoing. 7 realms, 7 barriers, each demanding recognition rather than confrontation. And at each threshold, entities once dismissed as myth, archons, gatekeepers of perception, reappear as active agents, maintaining a system that quietly shapes human thought and limits awareness. It's a system designed not to crush or dominate by force, but to guide subtly, keeping perception confined while making the constraints feel like normalcy. What's striking is how applicable this feels today. Mary's movement through these realms isn't about conquest, it's about recognition, about understanding the rules that govern each space and learning to navigate them without triggering resistance. And here, the unsettling part. Each gate she passed through, each test of perception, seems to echo the boundaries we still encounter, right now, in the way we see the world, in the information we accept, in the thoughts we assume are our own. Invisibility has taken on a new meaning in this context. It isn't a limitation, it's a strategy. The system that shapes perception thrives on what goes unseen, on what remains hidden in plain sight. Within the last 24 hours, it's become harder to ignore just how pervasive this strategy is. Thoughts, impulses, anxieties, all of them continue to appear self-generated, even as we begin to question where they actually come from. There's a psychological occupation, subtle and persistent because it feels internal. And the more we assume that what we see, what we feel, is purely our own creation, the deeper the system's influence runs. The limits of human vision, once taken for granted, are now being reconsidered. The range of reality we perceive is narrow, far narrower than we've been taught to accept. It's not an accident, it's functional. What exists beyond our ordinary perception isn't distant or abstract. It's adjacent, immediate, overlapping with the world we think we know. This realization tightens the suspense, because if perception has been intentionally constrained, then the true extent of what's around us has been consistently misunderstood. The veil isn't distant, it's right in front of our eyes, and yet it has managed to stay unnoticed for centuries. And then there's the remarkable capacity that has always existed within us, quietly dormant, waiting to be remembered. Our perception is not dictated solely by the eyes, but by the brain, by the filters it has learned to impose. For so long, these filters have suppressed potential, shaping what we deem real and ignoring what lies just beyond our trained attention. And yet suddenly, we remember that this capacity isn't lost, it's being restored. Nothing new is being added. It's all awakening from within, revealing that human perception is far more flexible, far more powerful than we've been led to believe. This shift isn't a distant, abstract change. It's happening here now, and it feels almost imperceptible at first. It's subtle, like a gentle widening of vision, an expansion of awareness. There's a quiet power in this shift, a realization that reality is not fixed, that our minds are not merely passive observers, and that what we once thought invisible can, in fact, be seen. The implications ripple across every aspect of life, how we understand ourselves, how we perceive others, and how we navigate the world around us. In this moment, the story of Mary Magdalene, the gatekeepers, and the lost scriptures becomes a mirror. It's not just a narrative from centuries ago. It's a guide to perceiving the currents beneath the surface, the hidden architecture of thought and awareness that continues to shape humanity. It's a call to awaken, to remember, and to recognize that what was once thought invisible may now be visible if we are willing to see it. And as awareness begins to stir, the question transforms. It is no longer simply, how did you see them? But can I see them too? And with that question comes a profound invitation to expand perception, to recognize the forces at play, and to reclaim a part of human awareness that has always been ours, waiting patiently for recognition. The shift is subtle, yes, but undeniable. It's a rekindling of the mind's potential, a reminder that the barriers to perception have always been surmountable, not through force, but through understanding and recognition. This is not just a journey through ancient texts. It's a journey through the landscape of the human mind, a reawakening of latent capacities, and a revelation that the world is far richer and more layered than it has ever been presented. Every sensation, every impulse, every fleeting thought holds a trace of these unseen currents, and recognizing them is the first step toward reclaiming the full spectrum of human awareness. Over the past day, something subtle yet deeply unsettling has begun to stand out in ordinary moments. The kind of moments most people usually dismiss without a second thought. A flicker at the edge of your vision, a shadow that seems to move when nothing should be there. That strange sensation that something just passed by, only to vanish the instant you try to look directly at it. Until recently, these moments were quickly explained away as tired eyes, imagination, or stress. But now they're being reconsidered, not as mistakes of perception but as interruptions in it. As if, for a split second, something slipped through a crack in the system. What makes this especially uncomfortable is how familiar these experiences are. Almost everyone has felt them at some point. That quick glance to the side when you sense movement only to find nothing there. The feeling that something was present just before you turned your head. Over the last 24 hours, these fleeting encounters have taken on a different weight. Instead of being ignored, they're being examined. And once examined, they begin to feel less random, less accidental, almost patterned. This shift has pulled attention toward a part of human perception that's rarely respected: peripheral vision. Most people are taught, directly or indirectly, that real seeing happens only when we focus straight ahead. That clarity requires sharp attention, narrowed concentration, and direct gaze. But peripheral vision works differently. It's broader, less detailed, yet far more sensitive to movement, contrast, and change. It doesn't demand certainty. It notices before the mind has time to explain things away. In recent reflection, this broader visual system has become central to the mystery. Peripheral sight seems to pick up what direct vision misses, and not because it's better, but because it's less controlled, less filtered. It operates before logic steps in, before labels, before assumptions, before the brain decides what is allowed to exist. When something appears there, it doesn't arrive fully formed. It arrives as distortion, as motion without shape, as presence without clarity. What's especially unsettling is the growing realization that these momentary detections may not be glitches at all. They may be lapses, brief failures in whatever mechanism keeps certain things outside of conscious awareness. The fact that these sightings vanish the moment attention sharpens no longer feels like proof they weren't real. It feels like proof of how effective the suppression is. The system doesn't need to erase them completely. It only needs to ensure they don't remain long enough to be studied. And so the unease grows, because once you accept that these moments might not be illusions, you're left with a far more disturbing possibility. That something has always been there, that human perception has been brushing up against it repeatedly, and that we've been trained, intentionally or not, to look away at exactly the wrong moment. This brings us to a realization that feels almost backward at first. For a long time, people have believed that if you really want to see something unusual, you have to focus harder, concentrate more, lock your attention onto a single point and search. But over the last day, that assumption has begun to unravel. Intense focus doesn't expand perception. It narrows it. It reinforces the same filters that have always been in place. It strengthens the boundaries instead of softening them. What's emerging instead is the idea of seeing without seeking, a mode of awareness that isn't tense or demanding but relaxed and open, soft attention rather than sharp focus. When the mind stops trying to force clarity, perception begins to behave differently. It becomes more receptive, less defensive. The brain, rather than resisting unfamiliar input, starts to notice patterns. And that's where something important happens. The brain is extraordinarily good at pattern recognition, but only when it's allowed to observe over time, not when it's rushing to categorize or dismiss. When similar distortions appear again and again, even briefly, the brain starts to adjust. Old filters weaken, not through effort but through repetition. The mind begins to accept that something persistent may be present, even if it doesn't yet understand what it is. There's a threshold here, and it's subtle. As long as these sightings disappear instantly, they're easy to ignore. But when something lingers just a fraction longer than expected, perception shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. The experience stops feeling like imagination and starts feeling like interruption, like reality behaving differently than it's supposed to. And now, within the last 24 hours, reports have begun to describe something even more striking. Not clear figures, not defined beings, but distortions, warps in space, shimmers where the background doesn't behave correctly, movements that don't align with shadows or light sources. These accounts share a common theme. Whatever is being noticed doesn't look solid. It looks unstable, as if it doesn't fully belong in the visual field it's entering. What's fascinating is how immediate doubt remains. Even for those experiencing this firsthand, the mind resists rewriting reality too quickly. It searches desperately for familiar explanations. Fatigue, optical illusions, stress, anything that allows the existing framework to stay intact. This resistance isn't weakness, it's conditioning. The brain has been trained to protect a specific version of reality, and sudden deviations trigger automatic correction. But then comes the detail that keeps standing out. The defining sign that refuses to be dismissed. Movement in response to attention. Not imagined movement, not drifting shadows, but a subtle, unmistakable shift that occurs when awareness changes, when attention softens instead of sharpens, when the observer doesn't chase the sighting but allows it. That reaction changes everything, because imagination doesn't respond. Hallucinations don't adjust to awareness in a consistent way. Illusions don't behave as if they're being observed. Reaction becomes the dividing line, not belief, not faith, not expectation, response. And this is where confirmation begins to form without belief ever being required. The experience doesn't ask you to accept anything. It doesn't demand conviction. It simply presents a question through behavior. If something reacts, then something is there. Not fully seen, not fully understood, but present enough to notice when it's being noticed. What's unfolding now doesn't feel like discovery in the traditional sense. It feels like remembering how to perceive differently, like learning to stand in a room you've always been in but never really looked around. The cracks in the system aren't dramatic. They're quiet, momentary, easy to miss. But once you recognize them, it becomes harder to unsee the pattern forming around them. And the most unsettling part isn't what might be seen next. It's the realization that these moments may have been happening all along, waiting patiently at the edge of awareness, not forcing entry, not demanding attention, simply existing just outside the narrow band of what we were taught to see. Double. Something else has begun to change, and it's not subtle anymore. Over the last day, there's been a noticeable shift in the balance of power, not through conflict or resistance, but through something far quieter. Awareness itself is interrupting a process that once ran automatically. Emotional cycles that used to repeat without question are being observed as they happen, and that observation alone is changing their behavior. Fear, anxiety, sudden irritation, even unexplained sadness. When these states are noticed instead of immediately absorbed, they stop functioning the way they used to. What once acted as fuel now behaves more like data. Emotion no longer pulls awareness inward and traps it in reaction. Instead, it becomes information, something to be understood rather than consumed by. And in that shift, something important is exposed. Whatever depended on those emotional surges loses its grip. The urgency it relied on begins to replace its authority. Control dissolves not because it's challenged, but because it's no longer needed. This reversal doesn't announce itself. There's no confrontation, no dramatic collapse. It happens silently, almost politely. The moment awareness disengages, the mechanism starves. And the most unsettling part is realizing how effortless it is. No force is required, no resistance, just the refusal to be pulled automatically into the same emotional loops. The system weakens not because it's attacked, but because it's seen. As this awareness stabilizes, perception starts to move outward. The world doesn't change, but the way it's experienced does. Personal spaces are the first to respond. Homes, rooms, familiar environments suddenly feel different, not because anything physical has shifted, but because they're being observed differently. Corners that were ignored now register. Silence feels more active. The space itself feels less neutral, more responsive. People too begin to appear differently. Emotional shifts in others no longer feel random or purely personal. There's a growing sense that moods move through environments, that influence travels, that what someone feels may not always originate within them. This doesn't create fear. It creates clarity, compassion even. Because once you see emotional influence as something that moves through space, judgment starts to lose its appeal. In crowded environments, this becomes even more pronounced. Public spaces reveal patterns that were previously invisible. Emotional density, tension, agitation. It's no longer just noise. It's structured, moving, almost directional. And with that recognition comes an unexpected ethical weight. When you can see without interfering, the question becomes how to remain present without imposing. Observation itself becomes a responsibility. As perception sharpens, attention turns to space in a new way. Certain areas begin to stand out. Doorways, hallways, corners, thresholds that were once purely functional now feel significant. These liminal zones seem to hold a different quality, as if they mark transitions not just in movement but in awareness. Recently, these spaces are being noticed again, not symbolically but practically. What's remarkable is how recognition alone alters them. You don't need to do anything. You don't need rituals, words, or gestures. Awareness changes how these spaces behave. Presence shifts. The atmosphere reorganizes itself subtly, as if responding to being acknowledged. There's a quiet authority in this, one that doesn't rely on dominance or display. Attention proves sufficient. As illusion weakens, environments adjust. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. The space feels clearer, less crowded, less heavy. It's as though certain layers withdraw when they're no longer ignored. And this brings up an unavoidable question. If this awareness is so simple, so accessible, why was it ever removed from common understanding? That question has been resurfacing with intensity over the last day, and the answer when it comes is surprisingly straightforward. Simplicity was the threat, not power, not rebellion, visibility. A population that sees cannot be managed through obscurity. Systems built on blindness collapse when perception becomes ordinary, not elite awakening, not special knowledge, just regular people noticing what's actually happening. No hierarchical structure survives widespread perception, not because people rise up, but because manipulation loses its efficiency. The irony is impossible to ignore. What was hidden never required permission to access. It didn't demand initiation. It didn't require authority. It only required attention, gently applied. And now this way of perceiving is beginning to integrate into daily life. Reality doesn't fracture or dissolve. Bills still exist. Conversations still happen. Time still moves forward, but perception includes more. The field of awareness feels wider, richer, less constrained. There's no going back to the previous simplicity because it no longer feels simple. It feels incomplete. What emerges instead is a sense of sovereignty that doesn't seek control over others. Awareness brings clarity, not dominance. It sharpens choice rather than enforcing outcomes. And perhaps most importantly, it allows mystery to remain without fear. Not everything is explained. Not everything is named. But almost nothing feels entirely unseen anymore. The mystery doesn't end here. It continues, quietly unfolding in the background of everyday life. But now it does so in the open. Now you've glimpsed the truth lurking beyond ordinary sight, the archons that feed on fear and ignorance, and the power hidden in your own awareness. Mary's revelation is clear. Seeing is sovereignty, ignoring is surrender. If you truly dare to witness, comment, "I see them." Share this secret, like and subscribe. Because those who turn away remain trapped, while the awakened take control.